My father stopped conversing with me and being close to me after the age of like 10, 11, and I couldn't really figure out why. I struggle to this day with the way that I interact with the men in my life because I didn't have a strong role model.
Growing up in poverty, you can actually be restricted in the way that you dream. And dreams, by definition, should be something that you're not restricted for. You should be able to dream big.
You may not want to hear this, but forgive your parents. Wallahi, forgive them. And when you become a parent yourself, just make sure you end the cycle. I urge parents to understand that a toxic marriage can damage the defense mechanism children need to grow. I know you love your children, but consider if your broken marriage is causing more harm than good. An amicable separation could save their life. For children, it's very difficult when they are in a position that they see their parents fighting, arguing all the time. It's never-ending problems, hassle, aggro. Growing up in that environment, wallahi, it really ruins a child's psyche. They don't understand love properly, they don't understand compassion, and oftentimes they grow up with scars that stay with them for life. I've seen kids like this really lose themselves. And so we often find that even in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, the companions would get divorced. They would separate, and as a last solution, it's always something that shouldn't be seen as a stigma. And I always say that if something is not working and you've given it your all and you've tried it all, then for those two people, perhaps separation is the best thing, because oftentimes it's letting go when you actually are able to have that release, have that comfort, have that peace, knowing that, okay, fine, now the noise has stopped. And you can rebuild yourself.
My father was violent, and eventually my parents broke up. We stayed in women's shelter while my mum sorted her life out. As kids, we were neglected and developed anxiety, never feeling safe. So this is something that I personally experienced in my own life, because my mum and dad, they had a divorce when I was about 6 years old. And I remember that the precipitating factor, the reason why it happened, was because of violence that was occurring in my house. I think with family, I think a lot of people think family as like you gotta have a mum and a dad, and then you have like maybe a pet, and then you have like, you know, your siblings, and that's what it is. And when people think of like broken families, they think of there's a father missing or a mother missing, there's a death that might have occurred in the family. But I think that a broken family isn't necessarily just one where, you know, you're missing, you know, a particular person, where they might have passed away or there might have been a divorce. A broken family can also be one where everyone's living under the same roof, but there's a lot of toxicity there, right? And there's a lot of, there's no love there, and there's no safety. So when you come home, you don't feel like home is a safe place. You actually feel like home is another battlefield. It kind of shaped me in the way that I started to think that this was normal. When I was growing up, I thought that, you know, when I become married, it's very normal to do this, you know, misbehavior towards my wife, for example. And I think that as I started growing up and I started hanging out with the right people and with the right mentors and right leaders, I started to realize that these things weren't right.
Fathers are supposed to protect their daughters, be involved in their lives, and make them feel loved. But I barely saw him and can count on one hand the conversations we had growing up. Coming from an ethnic family myself, my father stopped conversing with me and being close to me after the age of like 10, 11. And I guess it just had to do with them being uncomfortable with any sort of emotional connection with their daughters. I don't really know why that happened. And I myself still to this day struggle with that.
First day of kindergarten, I actually attended school and my mum was in the hospital for a particular thing. And I remember no one actually came to pick me up on my first day of kindergarten. And I was waiting there, and I knew mum was in the hospital, but as a kid, you just don't really click that your parents have other priorities and stuff like that. And I remember I was waiting there and I saw like the friends that I made there, their mum and dad came, and I remember watching them, you know, one mum, you know, the mum from the right hand and the dad from the left hand, and they carry them up and they swing them. And I realized that there was something that was a bit different about my family, because that was the first time I really truly interact with people in that sort of capacity. And initially, obviously, it made me sad because I was just a kid at the time. But I think when you go through that sort of stuff, you actually mature quite early. And I don't think that maturation is a good thing, because I think kids should be kids and they should be able to, dream and have fun and be messy and all that important stuff that's part of childhood. But that's just something that kind of I personally had to grow up with.
Your parents are supposed to be like the primary institute of socialization since you're young. And if they haven't been true role models, I struggle to this day with the way that I interact with the men in my life, because I didn't have a strong role model. You can physically provide all the physical needs of this child, but until and unless you show up emotionally, you're never really going to have a true relationship with your child. Like, sit there and listen to them and hear them and ask them about their day. And the main things that you need to be doing right now, that I practice as well, is to empower your own self and to seek validation and that reliance and that confidence within yourself, because you as a person are capable of doing so much without needing that sort of validation for someone who couldn't be there for you and probably might not be there.
I remember when I saw my peers' families, I asked them, like, oh, so you have a mum and a dad? And they were like, yeah. And then I said, oh, I think I have one, but my dad doesn't really live with us, right? And I think that growing up, I thought it was pretty normal. And then as I got a bit older and went to high school, I realized it actually wasn't very normal. When I looked at it, I said I could look at it one of two ways. I could see it as something quite sad, or I could see it as something that I can wear as like a badge of honor and say, you know what, I made it through a lot of difficulty, and despite having this sort of drawback, I still can achieve great things. I think that the idea of masculinity for me kind of developed from being, in my mind, I thought you had to be like really dominant and really strong, and you have to be really loud, and you should be really angry, right? That's what I thought growing up, because that's all I saw. But as I sort of grew up even further and became like closer to adulthood, I started to look at masculinity as what I was sort of missing in my life. And I think in my life, I missed a lot of softness. I missed a lot of restraint. I missed a lot of, people being able to control their anger. And I think I thought of masculinity as something that I missed in my life, and how I can give that in the future to other people, as well as, my own family when I do have a family, inshallah.
I no longer seek to be around my family and isolate myself in my room. I feel like I can't talk about what is happening in my life. They don't even know how many nights I've cried into my pillow asking Allah to take me. I think people who have big families or siblings or brothers and sisters, sometimes they feel like they can't really share their feelings to their parents, their sisters, or whoever it is in the family, because they get made fun of, or maybe the families are the ones causing some sort of trouble to them and they can't express themselves, and it's just causing everything. And then they go into a little sort of a shell, and they hide away themselves. And it's just like it's not a good place. It's honestly a dark place, because once you isolate yourself, those feelings, they'll keep sort of escalating, they'll keep snowballing and getting worse. And I feel like the best thing here would be, if your family has caused something to happen to you, talk to them about it, and also express how you feel to your family, your parents, and make them understand that maybe X, Y, or Z, what they're doing to you is not okay, and ask them, hey, please, I'd like you to improve. But if you can't talk to your family, then talk to the person you feel most comfortable next to, because going into that shell and isolating yourself is not going to do anything better. It's just going to make it worse and worse, and slowly over time you're going to realize that. So just see some sort of help. Don't be shy. I know there's a stigma around psychologists, mental health, but take that step, and who knows what it's going to do to your life.
Mothers are supposed to be their daughters' best friends, but I was always competing to do more housework, hoping it would make me worthy of her love. Wow. This is such an interesting confession, because I think it has to do with the fact that our parents, when they were growing up, they didn't have oftentimes the privilege of having an emotional connection to their own parents. So oftentimes it was just how they could be useful in their own ways and make worth through that. And oftentimes it just feels like a competition, fighting for their love, especially when you're a daughter and you have brothers, because they can get through by just doing the bare minimum. If I was this person, I would recognize that no matter how much work or how much things I try to achieve, it will never make me win over their love, because not only are you going to be eroding your own self away, you're going to try and please someone who will never be satisfied. And your parents will have a hard time with being a quote-unquote best friend with you, but just being able to recognize them as your parents and having mercy and compassion towards them, while also recognizing your own self as your own person who can make their own decisions, will take you a long way. Because it took me a really long time to realize that no matter what I did, I could be the best in school, I could do the best at home, but if my brothers or if somebody else in the family did something slightly better, I would never ever be able to live up to that expectation. And that's 100% okay. You need to be okay with not living up to everyone's expectations, because that just makes you a people pleaser. You need to strive to fulfilling Allah's expectations and aligning your own purpose that you have found for yourself in this life.
Growing up poor, we barely had food and would share one orange between 6 kids. SubhanAllah, I didn't feel full until I was 18 and got my own job. It's a pretty, relatable experience for me personally again. I went, hungry many times growing up. Like, I remember a lot of times we would skip out on dinner because we couldn't really afford it. I think initially for me, it was something that made me feel that I was limited, and it made me kind of boxed into a particular, way of life. And I remember when I was in kindergarten, they did this one activity where you had to draw yourself in the career that you think you'll be in the future. And I remember that in my life, I never really saw anything besides like what my father worked. So he was a taxi driver. And I remember in my mind, I actually thought that I wanted to be like the king of the world, or I want to be a firefighter. But then I remember that all I ever saw in my life was my father being a taxi driver. And of course, I have a lot of respect for taxi drivers. There's nothing wrong with it. But I remember I limited myself to just what I saw. And I think that a lot of times, especially for young kids, growing up in poverty, you can actually be restricted in the way that you dream. And dreams, by definition, should be something that you're not restricted for. You should be able to dream big. But when I started to grow up and I realized that there's people you can ask for help, there's mentors that are happy to help you, there's people who can step into the gaps that you have in your life, I started to realize that I could actually achieve things. And I think at the end of it, after going through a lot of that hardship, I started to realize that I actually don't have anything to lose. And I think that was something that was quite liberating. Like, I came from nothing. I was always sort of like an underdog. So for me, if I achieved anything, that was a huge achievement for me. And for my family, for example, no one went past year 10 education, and until my mum sort of went to university and she got a degree. And I remember in year 4, I used to tell all my teachers, like, my mum's the smartest person, she's gone through university. Whereas a lot of other people, they don't have the same sort of wow factor when they hear about someone going to university, but I did. And so anything that I really achieved was always a wow factor, right? It was always me going above what people expected of me. And once I started achieving enough things, I started to realize that I actually can dream, and I can actually extend the box that I put myself in. And I started to dream of being, for example, a doctor, right? Even though in the 60+ year history of my high school, no one has ever become a medical student and become a doctor eventually. But I did become the first medical student, and I just finished my training as a medical student, so now I'm a doctor. And I'm the first person about 60-something years to ever be that. I'm the first person from my family to ever become a doctor. And I think that the more I achieve, thanks to all the people that are around me and all the people who give me help, and thanks to the blessings that Allah has given me, I think the more I kind of push that box of what is achievable.
My parents raised me with strict rules, hurting me emotionally and physically, believing it was for my success because of this. I feel disconnected from Allah, no matter how hard I try. I fear I'll never feel like a normal adult. When it comes to life, when we're young, we hyper-exasperate. We make things seem bigger than they are. I often remember the times where I was about to pack my bags. My dad, he really, subhanAllah, had a lot of arguments with my dad, a lot of aggro, a lot of conflict. I said, that's it, I'm packing my bags. I have £100 saved up. I'm leaving this place. I'm going now. Every child has disagreements, conflict with their parents. Every child does. But if you're feeling that distant from your parents, then do not make the mistake of feeling distant from Allah Azza wa Jal. Because remember that humans are weak, and it's your parents' first time on planet Earth as well. No one taught them how to raise children. No one teaches you how to love. When you have children, you just have to figure it out. It's not something that you're taught. There's no textbook, there's nothing. It's just something that you learn on the go. And therefore, you may not want to hear this, but forgive your parents. Wallahi, forgive them. And when you become a parent yourself, just make sure you end the cycle. Break the cycle when you're older. Make sure. Live a life of purpose that breaks that cycle. And understand that through this pain that you feel, this loneliness within your own home that you feel, this is the time to connect with Allah Azza wa Jal. This is the time truly to build that relationship with Allah Azza wa Jal and to really, really, really build that bond. Because remember, when you feel empty, when you feel hollow, when you feel like there's nothing there, that's when Allah Azza wa Jal comes to fill that gap.
I always think of this one tree that we have in Australia. It's called the banksia tree. And the banksia tree is actually a tree that lets off these seeds when there's fire. And normally when you think of fire and plants, fire normally destroys plants and it chars it and it keeps it mangled and it goes all black. But with this particular tree, when it lets out the seeds, it actually relies on fire to open up the seed so it can germinate and become another beautiful tree again. And I think that as human beings, we're sort of like this banksia tree, whereby sometimes the most beautiful and sweet and amazing things about ourselves come from the difficulty and challenges that we face. And I remember there was this one patient that I saw in the hospital who came from Gaza. And it was a very interesting story that I remember, where he came to the hospital and we're doing a very simple procedure that we do day in, day out, maybe 5 times a day on our patients. And this particular patient, once we finished it, normally patients say thank you very much and then they go on their way. But this particular patient, he came to us and he said to us, as we were leaving, he said to the doctor, he said, "Can you please come back, doctor? I want to say something to you." And then the doctor came back and he told him, "I want to thank you for how you asked me before you did the procedure. I want to thank you for when you put it in, you actually waited for the needle and you asked me how I was feeling. I want to thank you that throughout the procedure, you actually asked how I was doing. I want to thank you how you said we could take a break. I want to thank you that when you saw me sweating, you held my hand. I want to thank you, I want to thank you, I want to thank you, I want to thank you," right? And for me, I've never heard of a patient, say this to a doctor for such a simple thing. And it just made me think again of the banksia tree, how this person must have gone through so much hardship, and it brought out this beauty of him of being thankful for everything that he ever faces. So I think that when you go through this hardship, of course there are deficits, but there's also a lot of beauty that can come out of you. And you've gone through a lot of difficulty, and I think you should use that and take it in your stride and become the best person you can, because you understand something that many people don't, and you're in a special position that Allah has put you in to understand the experiences, and it's up to you how you kind of use it. Will you be like a banksia tree, or are you going to become charred and mangled, right? It's up to you, the pathway that you go down. And I think that if you take it in your stride, you can be an amazing person.